Today I'm going to talk about a band that started as a post-punk band but moved to a glam metal sound to adapt to the changing musical landscape. This decision gave them the highest charting album of their career. I'm talking about the band The Cult with their fourth studio album. It was released on April 10th, 1989 and is celebrating 35 years. I'll give you some history on the band leading up to this album. Then I'll talk about the songs and my thoughts on each of them. This was also one of the first metal albums that I bought when I was getting into heavy metal, so I will share some personal experiences. The band was formed in England in 1981. The original name of the band was Southern Death Cult. The name of the band had two meanings. The first meaning was taken from the name of a cluster of 14th century Native American groups, but the name was also inspired by the political climate at the time. At this point in time, they played post-punk and gothic music. They eventually got signed to an independent label named Situation 2. They toured with bands such as Bauhaus and Theater of Hate. They then released a compilation album called Southern Death Cult, comprising their single named Moya, as well as live recordings and radio sessions. In 1983, Billy Duffy joined the band and it was renamed Death Cult. In 1983, they also released the Death Cult EP. But then they were given a big opportunity. They had the chance to appear on network television. The show was called The Tube on Channel 4. They knew this would bring in a larger audience, so they changed their name one more time to The Cult. This was a way of toning down the name. They were now ready to record their debut album called Dreamtime. This album still had a post-punk and gothic rock sound and had two singles named Spirit Walker and Go West. They followed this up with Love in 1985. This album was their big break. They had 3 top 40 singles in the UK. These singles included She Sells Sanctuary, Rain, and Revolution. They followed this up with Electric in 1987. This album saw the band adapting to the musical landscape once again, moving towards a hard rock sound. This change in sound was also due to the fact that it was produced by Rick Rubin. This album had a big single, Love Removal Machine, which had a main guitar riff that reminded me a lot of Start Me Up by the Rolling Stones. This album did very well, although the critics said that their new sound seemed to borrow ideas from AC/DC and Led Zeppelin. They also criticized the cover of Born to Be Wild by Steppenwolf, saying it was one of the worst covers of that song. 2 years later, they followed up with Sonic Temple. This album continued with their movement towards a hard rock and glam metal sound. I remember this very well because the first time I heard this band was when I watched the music video for their single Firewoman. This was the first time I had ever heard this band. I later found out they had another 3 albums, and I think I went out and bought the previous album, Electric, as well. This album also had a cleaner and more accessible sound, which was due to bringing Bob Rock on board to produce the album. So here's some trivia. Eric Singer played drums on the demo version of this album back in 1988. This was before he would join Kiss in 1991 after the death of Eric Carr. This is also their highest charting album, peaking at number 10 in the US. The album cover features guitarist Billy Duffy with his Gibson Les Paul. This is partially obscured by a picture of Ian Astbury. The back cover features bassist Jamie Stewart, and then an additional illustration on the insert shows the band from left to right with Astbury, Duffy, and Stewart. The band was only a 3-piece at the time, and this was also the last album with Jamie Stewart, who left in 1990. The album was recorded with a session drummer named Mickey Curry. The album has 10 songs and is about 52 minutes long. The opening track is Sun King. The intro is kind of ominous. It feels like it's building up to something. The song then takes off with some guitar riffs that were typical of the glam metal days. Let me read a quote from Ian Astbury about the song meaning. The title was inspired by Louis XIV. I mean, they were a pretty decadent lot. Used to crap on the floor in Versailles, I think. He'd get a little man to clean it up. The song's just basically a very masculine statement. Very much a he-dog song, as I am a man. Next is a song that got me interested in the band, Firewoman. This was the perfect song. It had the clean guitar tone in the intro that built up to the first verse. Billy Duffy had some memorable guitar riffs on this song. But I think what makes this great is how he blends the use of the clean and distorted tones throughout the song. The song also has a unique way of describing a hot woman, which I believe is the meaning behind the song. Then is the song American Horse. This was an interesting song. It had a lot of guitar riffs that sounded very goth or post-punk. The main song structure sounded very 80s glam and metal sounding. In the lyrics, they say, "He's gone crazy trying to tame the American horse." I guess that means that Americans could not be tamed unless there's a deeper meaning. The song does a good job of mixing the typical glam metal sound with some of their older goth vibes. Then we have Edie, Ciao Baby. I remember the song very well. It was the second single, and I also remember watching the video on MTV. This was their power ballad, but it was unique. It had orchestration along with the music. This was something a lot of bands were not doing at that time. It kind of reminded me of a glam metal version of Eleanor Rigby. The guitars are just so melodic on the song. The song is about Edie Sedgwick, a socialite who worked with Andy Warhol in the 60s. She was in several of his movies, including Poor Little Rich Girl and Beauty Number 2. In her final role, she played Susan Superstar in Ciao Manhattan. This is where Ciao Baby came from. She overdosed at 21 in 1971. Sweet Soul Sister was another one of the singles, but it was not as popular. It's a good song because it has this cool intro played on an organ, and then the song takes off. The song has a cool guitar riff. The chorus is very catchy. Had a sound that mixes keyboards and guitars. It also has that glam metal sound. The lyrics are about how European women were starting to adopt American culture. Soul Asylum is a song I just realized had the same name as another popular band from the 90s. This one has a nice build-up. This one is a little slower, has a darker tone. They have a nice balance between the keyboards and the guitars. There are lots of layers of sound with clean and distorted guitars, as well as different vocal effects used. If you listen with headphones, you can hear different sounds mixed into the song. It also has a lot of depth in the sound. I can hear elements of psychedelic rock and goth in the sound. There was even some orchestration towards the end of the song. Keep in mind, this is also the longest song on the album at 7.5 minutes. New York City is an upbeat rocker with Iggy Pop doing guest vocals. In the chorus, they sing Hell's Kitchen is a DMZ, which I had to Google, of course. It means a demilitarized zone. Later, they sing Hell's Kitchen is a crazy place. The song was inspired by the time the band spent a couple weeks in New York City recording their Electric album. New York was not the place it is right now. Back in the 80s, it was very different. It was a lot more crime and debauchery, so that was the meaning behind the song. Automatic Blues was probably one of the weaker songs on the album. I felt it sounded like a typical Poison type of song. It had a very basic glam metal sound. They did that thing where they play the guitar riff, it alternates with the vocals. Even the guitar solo sounded very basic with the wah-wah effect, and the drums had that typical cowbell sound. Soldier Blue was a very good song. It had a guitar riff that was really representative of what this band was all about. I guess the lyrical meaning is up to interpretation. I read one comment said that it was from the Sand Creek Massacre in Colorado in 1864. There was also a movie loosely based on this in 1970 called Soldier Blue. The song was a hard rocker. It was one of the better ones from the second half of the album. Wake Up Time for Freedom is the last official song on the album, but there's one more bonus track I'll talk about next. I thought this one was kind of formulaic. It sounded like a typical glam metal song from the late 80s. It had that vocal intro in a cappella style, and it was just very upbeat. There were a few things I liked about the song. One was the use of the clean guitars in the verse section. I thought that was a nice contrast with the distorted ones. But on the other hand, I thought the use of the cowbell during the chorus made it sound dated. There's a bonus track called Medicine Train. This one was just okay. I think they were going for that blues-based hard rock sound. It was similar to what Aerosmith was doing at the time. you can hear that with the use of the harmonic in some parts of the song. So I'm not saying it was bad. It was just a bonus track for a reason, I guess. And that's all for now. Check out my review of their most recent album from 2022 called Under the Midnight Sun. So I'm going to stick that right there. Thanks for watching. Please like this video. It helps me with the YouTube algorithm. Please subscribe if you have not already. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.